This is something I heard from a senior in the paranormal filming industry. Not firsthand, sorry. And it isn't some cursed object horror or anything that wrecks your whole life. But when I listened to it, I felt this faint, cold line run down my back. If you sleep alone, it might bother you a bit. It's about a pair of investigators my senior used to mentor. Let's call them Tomo and Hiro. A few years ago, when their channel was starting to get traction, they took on a job from a landlord who owned a small apartment building. Nothing fancy, just one of those old, slightly run-down places you see near suburban stations. The landlord wanted someone to stay 7 days in a particular unit, room 404. Not because it was discounted or anything, but because tenants never lasted more than a week. The place wasn't exactly an accident property, but something awful had happened there. Years earlier, the father living in that unit had a sudden, terrifying breakdown. He killed his wife and child and hid their bodies in the bedroom closet. Ever since then, every new tenant left within days. The landlord warned them, "Honestly, I don't like the air in that room. I don't like the feel of it." But Tomo, being confident, said it was fine and accepted the job. He told Hiro he'd treat it like any other test shoot. The logic wasn't unreasonable. The tragedy happened long ago, and none of the tenants after that were hurt or hospitalized. They just left early, that was all. So Tomo moved in with just a futon, a bag, and a static camera. He told Hiro he'd manage. He even sounded proud that he'd be doing a proper full-week investigation. But once he settled, he realized why people called the place creepy. Most days, nothing happened, but sometimes late at night, when everything was silent, he felt the strange weight of the apartment. Not sounds exactly, more like the air thickened near the closet. Then one night, around 2 a.m, he saw it. A shadow, human-shaped, passing over the small bathroom window. He panicked, checked the window from inside and out, even walked around the outside of the building. There was no way anything could cast a shadow there. The window was too high, too narrow, and still, he had seen it. He went back to bed, but the sensation that someone was standing near the closet wouldn't go away. The kind of feeling where the hairs on your arms rise for no logical reason. He checked the closet repeatedly. Nothing. But the feeling stayed. That week wore him down. He barely slept, barely ate. Still, he pushed through because he had promised to stay the full 7 days. On the 7th morning, Tomo messaged Hiro that he finally slept well the previous night, that nothing happened at all. He packed his things, left the apartment, and returned the keys. He looked tired, but normal. But later in the studio, Hiro reviewed the footage. Around midnight of the final night, Tomo sat up on the futon, not startled, just strangely blank. He took the camera off the tripod and pointed it toward the closet. Then he sat down in front of it. Hiro said Tomo's face looked wrong. His eyes were dull, unfocused, and then he made this slow, unsettling smile, not his usual expression. Too wide and too empty. Right then, the footage started to distort, horizontal tears, audio crackling, frames glitching. But through all that, Tomo didn't move. Behind him, the sliding closet door opened a few centimeters. From the gap, something shaped like a woman leaned forward. Not detailed, just a dark outline, but enough to see she was watching him. And then Tomo suddenly slumped forward and fell asleep. The camera dropped to the floor. No further movement. Tomo remembered none of it. He had been completely unconscious. Hiro told him what he saw, and Tomo went pale. They showed the landlord only the parts necessary, and the landlord quietly decided to stop renting out that unit. Nothing catastrophic happened afterward. No possession lingering, no curses. Tomo recovered fine. But the idea that something had used him, just briefly, left him shaken. That's the end. Personally, when my senior finished the story, the part that stuck with me wasn't even the shadow or the woman. It was imagining Tomo sitting there with that empty smile. If it were me, I don't think I'd have been brave enough to even stay the first night, let alone open a closet like that. After the divorce, sound became unbearable. The train announcements, the overlapping voices on the platform, even the rhythm of my own breathing felt too loud. Tokyo kept moving. I did not. I found myself remembering a place I had not thought of in years. A house beyond the village of Mizunokawa, past the cracked irrigation road where even the crows stopped calling. My grandfather's house. Abandoned. Unvisited. People said no one went there after sunset. That was exactly why I chose it. The bus dropped me at the last stop. When it pulled away, silence filled the space it left behind. The air smelled of wet earth and old leaves. Somewhere far off, a dull, hollow sound echoed, wood against wood, like someone tapping slowly, thoughtfully. The road narrowed into gravel. Tall grass leaned inward, brushing my legs. The evening sun bled into the fields, staining everything a dark red. And at the end of it all, the house waited. It crouched low, a sagging tin roof, blackened beams, moss thick on the walls. The veranda boards dipped as if tired of holding weight. The sliding door stood slightly open, just enough to notice. When I pushed it aside, the house reacted. Not with noise, but with pressure. The air inside was cold, dense, carrying a faint sweetness beneath the dust. The kind of smell that suggested something had been shut away for a long time and had learned to breathe on its own. There was almost nothing left inside. Broken bowls, a child's wooden top split in half, my grandfather's walking stick tangled in dead vines. I swept a small corner clean, laid out my futon, and told myself this was temporary, just a place to be unseen. That night, the house did not sleep. There was no wind, yet the beams shifted overhead, slow, deliberate creaks. Around 2 a.m, a sound came from above, soft, dragging footsteps, measured, heavy. Pacing the attic, I sat up, my heart tightened. Old houses make sounds, I repeated it again and again until it worked. The steps stopped, sleep eventually came. The next day passed quietly. Sunlight revealed nothing unusual. I cleaned more of the space, boiled rice, listened to insects reclaim the air at dusk. That night, the footsteps returned. This time, they moved from the attic stairs downward, one step at a time. Cold slipped under my door. I stood, ready to look. Then everything stopped. The silence was complete. No insects, no wind, only my pulse, loud enough to hurt. I locked myself inside my room and waited for morning. The house grew still before dawn, too still. Even the birds withheld their voices. At first light, I packed. My hands moved faster than my thoughts. Before leaving, I looked up one last time. A shape stood in the attic window, tall, thin, motionless, watching until the road bent away. Years passed. I told myself it was over, but some nights, just before sleep, I smell it again. Damp wood, ash, breath held too long. On one of those nights, I woke to murmuring beside my futon, low, uneven, a chant that did not belong to any prayer I knew. Mist pooled in the corner of the room, a shadow inside it. I did not move, I did not breathe. The attic door creaked open, slowly, painfully. Something heavy began descending the stairs, dragging itself closer. I ran. The veranda boards screamed beneath my feet. Footsteps followed. Faster now. Too close. A cold breath brushed the back of my neck. I did not look back until the village lights appeared. The next day, in daylight, I returned only to collect what I had left. The attic door stood open. The cigarette in the corner still burned. A thin line of smoke curling upward, as if it had never gone out. I locked the house and left. No one goes there now, but villagers say, at night, footsteps still move in the attic. Smoke seeps from the roof. Someone hums. Slow. Content. My grandfather did not live alone. The one who stayed never left. And sometimes when the wind changes, I know he is still waiting. My name isn't important. People usually just call me JD. It's been that way for a long time. Maybe because I move around a lot, maybe because I don't really like explaining myself. If you asked what I do for a living, I could give you an answer, but that wouldn't really be true. The only thing I've ever loved properly is fishing. Rivers, irrigation canals, mountain lakes, abandoned ponds. Anywhere there's water, I feel calmer. The quiet, the waiting, the nothing happening. Those are the best memories I have. That's why it still bothers me that the worst thing I've ever experienced came from the same place that used to give me peace. This happened a few months ago in early spring. The air was still cold, but the days had started to stretch out longer. My friend Masato was with me. He was the only person I knew who loved fishing as much as I did. We'd been friends since university, and whenever we talked about going somewhere, it was always the same idea. Let's go where no one else goes. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere untouched. There was a marshland on the edge of a protected forest up in Tohoku, the kind of place locals don't really visit anymore. Narrow water channels, reeds growing tall and dense, no proper road access. The only way in was a small two-person kayak. You had to carry it down a dirt trail and slide it into the water. It wasn't forbidden, but no one recommended going there either. The water was dark, not muddy exactly, just stained from years of fallen leaves and plant decay. Still enough that the surface barely moved. Tall grass rose on both sides like walls. Once we paddled in far enough, it felt like the world had closed behind us. It was quiet in a way that presses on your ears. We tied off the kayak, opened a couple of canned beers, and started fishing. Not talking much, just enjoying the stillness. After a while, Masato's rod bent sharply. He laughed, leaned forward too fast, and that's when it happened. His phone slipped from his jacket pocket. I saw it fall in slow motion, a small splash, and then nothing. It vanished straight into the black water. His smile disappeared instantly. He swore under his breath, then louder. That phone had everything: work files, photos, documents, insurance stuff. He kept repeating that if it was lost completely, he was finished. But if he could recover it, even broken, there was still a chance. He asked me to help him look. I told him it was pointless. The water was thick. You couldn't see your own hand in it, and it was deeper than it looked. But he didn't listen. He took off his shoes, rolled up his pants, and stepped in slowly. I remember thinking how wrong it looked, the way the water didn't ripple properly around his legs. He crouched down, feeling around with his hands. For a moment, everything was quiet enough that I could hear my own breathing. Then, he screamed. It wasn't loud at first, just sharp and sudden. Pain, surprise, fear, all at once. His body jerked forward, and he disappeared under the surface completely. I shouted his name without thinking. My voice sounded thin, useless. After a few seconds, he burst back up, gasping, covered in dark sludge. His eyes were wide, unfocused. He scrambled back toward the kayak, shaking so hard he could barely climb in. He kept saying, "Something grabbed me, it grabbed my legs." I asked what he meant. Fish, snake, turtle, anything. But he shook his head over and over. "No," he said, "not like that." It felt like hands, felt like fingers wrapping around my ankles, pulling. His skin was red just above the heels, marks like pressure bruises already forming. We didn't argue. We didn't look back. I untied the kayak and paddled harder than I ever had. The reeds brushed against the sides like they were reaching for us. Masato didn't speak the whole way out. He just kept turning his head, staring into the water behind us. Later, I tried to laugh it off, said it was probably a big carp, or a snapping turtle, something old, something strong. But he wouldn't look at me. He said very quietly, "No, JD, it wasn't alive like that." We left that area the same day. The phone was never recovered. The marks on his ankles stayed for weeks. Afterward, I searched online, old blogs, local folklore, anything about that marsh. There wasn't much, just vague warnings about deep water, children being told not to play there, except for one old line buried in a discussion thread. Someone had written years ago, "The water there isn't empty, it remembered." I still think about that sentence. Masato never fishes anymore. Not anywhere that isn't clear and shallow. Even hearing stories about rivers makes him uncomfortable. As for me, I still love water. But whenever I see a place where the surface is too still, too dark, I stop without really deciding to. Some things feel peaceful only until you understand what's underneath, because water doesn't show you everything, and whatever waits below doesn't always let go. I returned from the cemetery today. The wind there never moves gently. It rushes through the cedars in short, violent bursts, shaking their trunks as if someone were trying to twist them apart. The sky stayed low and colorless, pressing down on the land. I stood in front of the same grave I have visited every year, the stone dark with age, the carved letters softened by rain and time. Simkundeni 1986. 2004, there is nothing beneath that stone, no body, no bones, only soil that has never held her. And yet something heavy always settles in my chest when I stand there, as if I am visiting someone who is still waiting. I tell myself this was the last time. Every year I say that, and every year on the same night, a voice returns. It does not come from the forest or the wind. It comes from inside me, rising without permission, dragging me back to that night. The memory of 2004 has never faded. It only waits. There were 4 of us then. Me, my friend Satoshi, and our girlfriends, Mari and Aiko. We were students, restless and careless, driving north into the mountains of Aomori because we wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere dark. In those forests, sunset is sudden. One moment the trees are visible, the next they become silhouettes, layered in black. Night does not arrive there, it settles. Our campsite sat near an old mountain shrine that no longer appeared on maps. The torii gate leaned forward, half rotted, ropes hanging loose like discarded skin. Tall cedars surrounded the clearing, straight and narrow, their tops disappearing into shadow. When the wind passed through them, they swayed together like rows of dead soldiers responding to a silent command. At first, everything felt ordinary. Mari laughed too loudly at nothing. Aiko filmed short clips on her phone, like narrating our stupidity. We built a fire, opened cans of beer, and let the flames convince us we were safe. But Satoshi kept turning his head toward the trees, not staring, listening. I asked him what he was doing. He leaned close and whispered, "We're not alone." I laughed. 4 people. A fire, music playing softly from a speaker. How could we be alone? But his face stayed tight, the fear unmoved. The firelight caught his eyes and made them look too wide. As the night deepened, the forest sounds began to change. Footsteps echoed far away, light and quick, then stopped whenever we focused on them. Branches snapped without falling. The air felt crowded, as if something unseen was standing just beyond the firelight, careful not to cross it. Around 11, Satoshi placed a hand on my shoulder. His fingers were cold. "My grandmother used to talk about mountain spirits," he said. "Onryo that mimic the living. She said they use familiar voices, so you won't run." He handed me a small notebook. On the first page, written in thick, uneven strokes, was a single word, Shanlol. Below it, in trembling handwriting, a sentence followed. "A thing that wears voices. A thing that eats those who answer." I was about to joke when a twig snapped nearby. The sound was close. Too close. We froze. Flashlights swept the trees. Nothing moved. The forest went silent so completely that I could hear everyone breathing, uneven and fast. Then Mari's voice came from the tent. "Hey, can you come here?" It sounded wrong. Not panicked. Empty. Satoshi and I ran back. The tent had been torn open from behind, fabric shredded as if by claws. Mari was gone. One of her sandals lay in the dirt, darkened as if soaked. Aiko collapsed, screaming. Satoshi yelled at me to run. I refused. Then her voice came again from deeper in the forest, calling my name, and even before I heard it clearly, I knew. Whatever was speaking was not Mari. The voice came again, not from one place, but from everywhere at once, threading itself through the trees, sliding between the trunks, settling directly behind my eyes. It sounded like Mari, but thinner. as if something had scraped away the warmth and left only the shape of her voice behind. "Satomi," Aiko screamed. She dropped to the ground, clawing at the dirt, sobbing Mari's name over and over until it stopped sounding like a word. Satoshi grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Don't answer," he said. "If you answer, it knows where you are." The forest began to move. Not the trees themselves, but the darkness between them. Shadows stretched and collapsed, rearranging into paths that hadn't been there before. The fire dirt shrinking low as if it were afraid to be seen. Somewhere close, something stepped on dry leaves. Slow, deliberate. Mari's voice drifted closer. "I can't see. It's cold." It was perfect. The exact way she sounded when she was scared, but trying not to show it. My legs locked, my mind screamed at my body to move, but my feet felt nailed into the ground. Satoshi shouted my name and shoved Aiko into my arms. "Run," he said. "Don't look, don't listen." We ran. The trees blurred past us, their trunks bending inward like ribs. The ground dipped and rose without warning. Branches lashed my face. Aiko had gone limp, her breath shallow and uneven. Behind us, footsteps followed. Not running, walking, confident. The voice stayed with us. Sometimes it was Mari crying. Sometimes it was laughing softly, as if amused by our panic. And sometimes it was quiet, close enough that I could feel it breathing against the back of my neck. "Satoru, you promised." I made the mistake of looking back. Between the trees stood something tall and impossibly thin. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at wrong angles. The skin clung to its frame like dried paper stretched over bone. Its eyes glowed red, steady and unblinking. And on its face, hanging loosely, badly fitted, was Mari's face. Her eyes were wrong. Empty. The mouth moved, pulling at torn edges of skin. "Where are you going?" it asked in her voice, and another voice beneath it, layered and wet. "Don't leave me." My body stopped working. I would have stayed there if Satoshi hadn't dragged me forward, screaming at me to keep moving. The spell broke. We burst out of the trees and into the clearing where the car waited. Satoshi fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice. Something slammed into the back of the car, rocking it violently. Aiko woke screaming as the engine finally turned over. We drove. In the rearview mirror, it stood at the edge of the trees, watching. It did not chase us. It did not need to. The police said it was a bear or a prank or hysteria fueled by alcohol. They searched the forest for days. They found nothing. No Mari, no tracks. Only her sandal still lying where it had fallen. Time moved forward without asking permission. Aiko drowned herself in cheap liquor in a river 2 winters later. Satoshi was found hanging in his apartment, his notebook open beneath him, the same word written over and over until the page tore. I kept living. Every year I went to Mari's grave. I spoke to it. I told myself she could hear me. People say yokai are stories, warnings dressed as monsters. A few years ago, when I was still in university, me and my closest friend were always looking for ways to make some extra money. We weren't picky at all. Anything that paid cash was good enough for us. One evening, while scrolling through a local classifieds website, I came across a strange-looking post. It wasn't even under jobs. It was listed under miscellaneous. The advert read, "Attic clean-out help needed. 1 day only. No experience required. Generous pay. Contact by phone." The pay listed was 30,000 yen for 1 day of work. That immediately caught our attention. That was more than we usually made in a week. I called the number right away, but no one answered. So I left it alone, thinking it was probably fake. The next morning, I checked the site again. The same advert was reposted. Exact same wording, same number. This time when I called, a woman answered. Her voice was calm, almost tired. She told me the job was still available and asked if I could come that afternoon. I said yes and asked if I could bring a friend. There was a pause. Then she said yes. The more the better. She gave me an address on the outskirts of the city and told us to be there by 3. The house was older than everything around it. A narrow, two-story place, squeezed between newer buildings, like it had refused to move on with the times. The woman greeted us at the door. She looked to be in her late 40s, dressed plainly. She thanked us for coming and explained the job was simple. We just needed to clean out the attic and bring everything down into the living room. She said most of it was junk from the previous owner. She didn't go up there herself anymore because the ladder was steep. She said she'd pay us when we were done. That seemed fair enough. The attic ladder creaked loudly as we climbed up. Dust immediately filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The space was low, cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and trash bags. The only light came from a single bare bulb hanging from a wire. It swung slightly, even though there was no breeze. We started working without talking much, just focused on getting it done as fast as possible so we could get paid and leave. Most of what we found was boring. Old magazines, broken toys, faded clothes. Then in the far corner behind a stack of boxes, my friend froze. He crouched down and pulled something out carefully. It was a doll, about the size of a toddler, porcelain, cracked, pale skin, glass eyes, long black hair, matted and dusty. It was wearing a red dress that looked handmade and very old. I remember feeling uncomfortable immediately, like I shouldn't be looking at it for too long. We joked about it at first, said it looked cursed, something straight out of a horror movie, but neither of us laughed very hard. Something about it felt off. The doll was heavier than it looked, and when I took it from my friend, I noticed something strange. It was warm, not room temperature. Warm, like it had been sitting in the sun. That made no sense in a dark attic. I set it down with the rest of the items and tried not to think about it. As we continued working, we both started to notice a sound. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but it kept repeating. A soft tapping, almost like fingernails on wood. Each time we stopped and listened, it would stop too. Eventually, we finished and carried everything downstairs, including the doll. When the woman saw it, she stared at it for a little too long. Her expression tightened, but she said nothing. She handed us the money in cash, thanked us again, and asked if we had found everything. We nodded and left without asking questions. That night, my friend called me around midnight. His voice sounded shaky. He asked if I had brought anything home by accident. I told him no, and asked why. He said he kept hearing something in his room. A soft tapping noise, like something knocking from inside his closet. I told him he was probably just freaked out from the doll. Even as I said it, I could hear a similar sound in my own room, coming from somewhere near my bed. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was being watched. Sometime near morning, I swear I heard a child's whisper right next to my ear, saying my name. When I sat up, nothing was there, but the room felt colder than it should have been. The tapping stopped as soon as the sun came up. The next day, my friend came over. He looked exhausted. He told me he had dreamed about the doll. Standing at the foot of his bed, its head tilted to the side, its mouth slowly opening and closing, like it was trying to speak. My stomach dropped, because I had dreamed the exact same thing. Neither of us wanted to say it at first, but when we realized the dreams matched, down to the smallest detail, we went quiet. Later that evening, we decided to go back to the house. Something felt unfinished, like we had left something behind. When we arrived, the house looked darker than before. The woman answered the door again. She seemed annoyed to see us. We asked about the doll, told her it had made us uncomfortable. She stared at us for a long moment, then sighed. She told us the doll had belonged to her daughter, who had died years ago. She said the doll never liked being alone, and that it had a habit of following people who touched it. She asked if anything strange had happened to us. We didn't answer. She simply told us not to worry, and closed the door. That night, the tapping returned, louder this time, coming from beneath my bed. When I finally worked up the courage to look, there was nothing. Just dust and shadows, but I could feel something there. An awareness, like I wasn't alone anymore. The dreams got worse every night. The doll was always closer, always smiling wider. My friend stopped answering my calls. After a week, I went to his apartment. It was empty. His phone was on the floor, still playing a voicemail on loop. A child laughing softly. I reported everything to the police. There was no evidence, no doll, no woman, no house. The address led to an empty lot. Even now, I still hear tapping sometimes, especially at night. And sometimes when I wake up, I find long black hairs on my pillow. I don't think the doll ever really left. I think it just needed a new place to stay. I've always believed that once you finish work for the day, you should go straight home. No shortcuts, no curiosity, no wandering around just because the night seems quiet. And absolutely never stay out past the last train. This is the reason why. Back when I was still a frita, I worked at a small logistics office in Saitama, Mahito here. I handled whatever clerical tasks they dumped on me, plus the unglamorous leftover work no one else wanted to touch. Because I wasn't a full-timer, I often ended up staying late to finish things the regular staff refused to take home. Naturally, that meant leaving the office at 1 or 2 in the morning. The kind of hour where the whole city looks dead even though you know people are still awake somewhere behind windows. Our office was on the 3rd floor of an old, aging building right next to a closed-down DVD rental shop. The staircase smelled faintly of mold no matter how many times the landlord swore he deep-cleaned it. At night, the hall lights flickered weakly like they were thinking about giving up entirely. One night, I stayed later than usual, inputting shipment numbers, cleaning up someone else's messy spreadsheet, and sealing boxes for early morning pickup. By the time I finally shut the office computer down, nearly everyone had already gone home hours ago. The entire floor was silent. As I locked the office door, I felt an odd shift in the air behind me. A tiny, soft sound, like a faint tapping on glass. It came from inside the office I had just walked out of. I froze for a second, but exhaustion won over fear. I brushed it off, told myself it was the heater contracting or maybe a pigeon landing on the window, and headed down the creaky stairs. Outside, the street was emptier than usual. Even the convenience store on the corner had turned off its bright sign. The vending machine across from it hummed weakly, its light flickering like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to stay on or take a break too. My walk home usually took 15 minutes if I took the main street, 20 if I detoured, and barely 10 if I cut through the narrow alley behind the apartments. That alley, I always hated it. It wasn't dangerous. Nothing ever happened there. But the air inside it always felt different, thicker, heavier, like walking through a space that remembered things it shouldn't. Still, I took it. I was tired, and the shortcut shaved off enough time to feel worth it. The farther I walked into the alley, the quieter everything became. No cars, no insects. Even the faint hum of the vending machines faded as if I'd stepped out of the city and into some forgotten corridor. Halfway through, I heard footsteps behind me. Light ones. Soft, barefoot sounding, like a small child walking slowly on wet pavement. I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped too. My chest tightened. I swallowed hard, turned around, and nothing. Just the long, dim alleyway stretching behind me into silence. I told myself it had to be echo or water dripping somewhere. I forced myself to keep walking. A few steps later, the footsteps started again. Still behind me, still soft, still matching my pace exactly. I sped up. They sped up. Not aggressively, more like someone following a friend, or a child trailing after a parent who didn't realize they were being followed. I didn't look back again. I didn't have the courage. When I finally stepped out of the alley onto the main road, everything stopped instantly. The footsteps, the heavy air. Even the silence felt normal again. Trying to calm myself, I muttered something about sleep deprivation and kept moving. My apartment building was a 6-floor concrete block that looked older than it actually was. The motion sensor light at the entrance rarely worked, and tonight was no exception. The entrance stayed dark as I approached. As I reached into my pocket to take out my keys, I heard that same soft pitter-patter behind me, not from across the street, not from down the sidewalk, right behind me. Close enough that I could feel a shift in the air. My fingers trembled. I dropped my keys. They clattered loudly on the concrete, echoing down the empty street. As I crouched to pick them up, I saw something in the small reflective window on the building's entrance door. A dark shape. Short. Standing directly behind me. Its head tilted to the left as if studying me. No face, no eyes, just a smooth, glossy darkness where features should be, like a silhouette filled in with ink. My blood ran cold. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Instinct screamed at me that looking at it directly would make things much, much worse. I shoved my key into the lock, flung the door open, and stumbled inside the building. The moment the door shut behind me, the footsteps stopped. Silence. Heavy. Oppressive. But at least it was silence. I took the elevator up. It groaned as always, as if lifting my weight was too much work. When I reached my floor and walked toward my apartment, the hallway felt unusually dark, like the ceiling lights were dimmer than I remembered. As I slid my key into my lock, a sound echoed down the hallway. Tock, 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 light knocking, rhythmic, coming from the fire door at the far end of the corridor. My head snapped toward it. The door was barely visible in the gloom. Tock, 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 then silence. The fire door shifted and slowly began to open on its own. My breath caught. I stared as a small figure stepped out from the stairwell shadows. It was the same shape I'd seen reflected, child-sized, leaning forward slightly, its entire face a smooth black void. It tilted its head again in that same unnatural way, almost curious, almost expecting me. My legs went numb. Terror flooded my chest like someone had poured ice water into it. I shoved open my apartment door, stumbled in, and slammed it shut with everything I had. I locked it once, twice, 3 times, then collapsed onto the floor, listening for footsteps. I didn't hear any, but I also didn't sleep that night. The next morning, when I finally gathered the courage to leave for work, I noticed something on the hallway floor. Small, wet footprints. Child-sized. They led from the fire door straight to my apartment, right up to the threshold. And then they stopped. Perfectly, as if whatever made them had been standing directly outside my door for a very long time. I moved out before the month ended, and even now, whenever I hear light footsteps behind me at night, I never look back. Some things follow you only if you acknowledge them. This happened when I was in middle school. I lived in a fairly ordinary town in Kanagawa Prefecture. It wasn't rural, but it wasn't busy either. Just rows of houses, small shops, and narrow streets that all looked the same. The kind of place where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. My school was about 20 minutes away on foot. I walked there every day, rain or shine. There were a few different routes I could take, but I always chose the same one out of habit. It went past a small shrine, then along a river, and finally through a residential area before reaching my house. At first, everything was normal. Then one day, I started feeling like someone was walking behind me. It wasn't obvious. I didn't hear heavy footsteps or breathing. It was more like a sensation, like the air behind me felt heavier. I'd get this strange pressure between my shoulders, the kind you feel when someone is standing too close. Whenever I turned around, no one was there. I told myself it was just my imagination. I was a kid, after all. Maybe I'd watched too many scary videos online, but the feeling didn't go away. It followed me home every day. A week later, I started hearing footsteps. They weren't loud, but they were distinct, slowful, always matching my pace. If I slowed down, they slowed down. If I stopped, they stopped too. The first time I stopped and turned around properly, my heart skipped. The street was empty. No cars, no bicycles, no people. Still, the footsteps had been right there. I laughed it off at first. I even talked to myself, saying things like, "See, there's nothing there." But my voice sounded strange in the quiet street, like it didn't belong. That night, I had a dream. I was walking home, just like always. The sky was dark, and the streetlights didn't turn on no matter how far I walked. I could hear footsteps behind me, but when I tried to run, my legs wouldn't move. When I finally turned around, there was something standing right behind me, so close I couldn't see its face. I woke up sweating. After that, small things started happening. My school shoes would be muddy, even on days when it hadn't rained. My backpack would be unzipped when I knew I'd closed it. Once, I found a strand of long black hair on my desk at home. No one in my family had hair like that. The footsteps became more frequent. Sometimes I'd hear them inside my house. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, I'd hear slow steps moving through the hallway. I was too scared to open my door. I'd just lie there, staring at the darkness, waiting for the sound to fade. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound crazy. One afternoon, I stayed late at school for club activities. By the time I left, the sun was already setting. The streets were quiet and the air felt heavy, like before a storm. That was when I saw it. As I crossed the bridge near the river, I glanced down at the water and saw my reflection. But there was something wrong. There were two reflections. One was mine. The other stood directly behind me. I spun around. About 10 meters away stood something shaped like a person. It was tall, unnaturally thin, and completely still. Its body looked dark, like a shadow that had learned how to stand upright. Where its face should have been was just blankness. No eyes, no mouth, nothing. Yet I knew it was looking at me. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook. I burst into my house, slammed the door, and locked it. My parents were home watching TV. They asked why I was breathing so hard. I said I'd just run the whole way. That night I heard footsteps stop outside my bedroom door. They stayed there for a long time. In the morning, I found wet footprints leading down the hallway. They stopped right in front of my room. After that, my parents let me change schools. We never talked about why. The footsteps stopped eventually. But even now, years later, whenever I walk home and feel someone behind me, my body freezes. Because I learned something back then. Sometimes when something starts following you, it doesn't want to hurt you. It just wants to make sure you never feel alone again. Mahito here. What you're about to hear was sent to me by a man who spends most of his life on the road. Someone who drives not just through towns and villages, but through places people aren't meant to linger in after dark. At the time this happened, Sasuke was living in a rural part of Shimane Prefecture. The kind of place where mountains press close to the roads and rivers run shallow and quiet for most of the year. He drove tractors and small transport trucks. Nothing glamorous. Just hauling soil, sand, bricks, whatever work paid. When business slowed down, he started taking jobs near a local brick kiln not far from his village. Nearby flowed an old river, wide, calm, and unsettlingly silent at night. The locals called it harmless, but they also stopped going near it after sunset. There was a bridge over the river, and downstream from it, a cremation ground, an old one, barely used anymore. A few months ago, after attending a wedding with friends, Sasuke returned home in the late afternoon. The sun was already losing its warmth, that dull orange color that makes shadows stretch too long. "Let's do one more run," he told his friend. "Just one trolley of soil." They loaded soil from the river, delivered it to the kiln, and while unloading, an older local man approached them. Quiet, polite, too calm. He asked about the rate. Sasuke waved it off. "Pay whatever you think is fair." The man nodded, then said something strange. "I need 4 trolleys, 2 today, 2 tomorrow." Sasuke hesitated. It was already getting late. But money is money, and night work is normal when you live this kind of life. By the time they gathered another tractor and set out, it was already 8:30 p.m. The river looked different at night. Not dangerous, not violent, just watchful. They drove the tractors into the shallow middle of the river and began loading soil. The only sounds were engines, shovels, and water shifting lazily around the tires. By 11 p.m., their bodies were done. One trolley was full. Sasuke's was still half loaded. Darkness pressed in from all sides. On one bank, dense forest. On the other, the cremation ground. After 11, no one comes here. Sasuke stepped away to relieve himself. That's when he saw them. At first, he thought it was fog or moonlight reflecting strangely on the water. 4 figures standing in the river. Still. Silent. They wore long, white garments, like old ceremonial robes, so long that no legs were visible beneath them. His heart tightened. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. His friends heard his voice and came over, shovels resting on their shoulders. "What is it?" they asked. Sasuke pointed. That's when more figures began rising from the water. Not walking, not swimming, emerging. White shapes, dozens of them, moving toward the shore. No splashing, no sound. His friends ran instantly. The other tractor roared to life, then stalled as its tire sank into mud. Once, twice, finally free, and it fled. Sasuke turned to his own tractor, wouldn't move. The tire was trapped deep in river silt. No matter how much he pushed the engine, it stayed there. The figures were close now. In the headlights, he saw them clearly. No legs, only skeletal torsos wrapped in white cloth, hollow rib cages, empty spaces where faces should have been. His mind went blank. He screamed at his friend to run. They abandoned the tractor and sprinted toward the cremation ground, the only path left. As they climbed the stone steps, their breath tearing from their chests, they saw her. A woman dressed entirely in black sitting behind the place where pyres are lit. Waiting. Her eyes were fixed on them. Not surprised, not angry, expecting. Sasuke said that was the moment he stopped being sure what was human and what wasn't. They ran past her without looking back and reached the main road. From there, they could still see the river, the abandoned tractor. But the white figures were gone. They called friends, neighbors, anyone awake. When a group finally gathered, they decided to retrieve the tractor. As they entered the cremation ground together, sticks in hand, a woman's laughter rang out. Loud, sharp, too close. Every single person turned and ran. One man broke down crying. No one argued after that. They left the tractor overnight. At sunrise, they returned. The river looked normal. The tractor was still stuck exactly where it had been. They freed it without incident. No white robes, no woman. But since that night, Sasuke refuses to work after dark. And even now, years later, he still wakes up unable to move, unable to breathe, feeling like something is standing just outside his vision. Watching. Waiting. Some places don't chase you, they let you leave. And then they follow you home.
I come from the city, and for most of my childhood, villages only existed for me in movies and television. Bright sunlight, children running through fields, laughter everywhere. That illusion broke the first and last time I visited my family's village. I was in 5th grade. It was summer vacation, and my parents decided to send me to the village for a few weeks. They said it would be good for me. Fresh air, open space, a different life. When we arrived, the first thing I noticed was how empty it felt. It was the middle of the afternoon, yet there was no one outside, no voices, no footsteps. Doors were shut. Even the dogs were silent. At our house, my grandfather was sitting alone in the courtyard. He wasn't resting. He was cleaning weapons, iron sickles, axes, even old swords. He worked slowly, carefully, like this was part of his daily routine. The moment he saw me, his expression changed. He turned to my father and said, quietly but sharply, "Why did you bring the child here?" There was no anger in his voice, only fear. "This village is not right," he said. I didn't understand what he meant. I was just a child. Later, he called me close and placed his hand on my head. His voice softened, but his eyes stayed serious. "You will not go outside this house in the afternoon," he said, "and not at night. If you ever have to go out, you will only go with me." For a day or two, nothing happened. The village remained silent, strange, but calm. Then I heard about the mango trees. Some local children whispered about a place where mangoes grew freely. Sweet ones. Big ones. One afternoon, when no one was watching, I decided to go on my own. I thought I would meet other kids. But outside, everything was deserted. The lanes were empty. The air felt heavy. The sun burned overhead, yet the village felt lifeless. I kept walking, unsure how far I had gone, until I reached a broken old house. Its walls were cracked, the boundary wall half collapsed. I sat there, leaning against the wall, waiting. That's when I noticed him. A tall man stood in front of me. I don't remember hearing footsteps. He was just there. He had a thick beard, and a strange, rotten smell clung to him. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He only stared. At first, I didn't feel afraid. Adults exist everywhere, I thought. But the longer he stared, the more my chest tightened. Something was wrong. I wanted to stand. I couldn't. My body felt heavy, my head started spinning. The last thing I remember is his shadow stretching over me. After that, there is nothing. Later, I was told what happened. When I didn't return home, my mother started searching. The village was alerted. When my grandfather heard where I had gone, his face went pale. He grabbed his weapons and ran. People said they had seen a child go toward that broken house. When they reached there, they found me lying unconscious on the ground. No man, no footprints, no signs that anyone else had been there. I didn't wake up for 1.5 days. My grandfather called a priest who performed a ritual. Incense filled the house. Chants echoed through the night. 3 hours after the ritual ended, I opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was my grandfather crying. He turned to my father and said, "Leave this village, right now, and never come back." We left soon after. That was my first and last visit. Even after my great-grandfather passed away, I never returned. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what lived in that village. But I still remember his stare. And sometimes, when summer afternoons grow too quiet, I feel like I'm being watched again. This happened to 2 Japanese YouTubers, Kuro and Takun. These two weren't just friends who made videos together, they were tied by the same dangerous curiosity, the kind that makes people walk toward places everyone else avoids. Kuro was the experienced one, calm, serious, a paranormal explorer who treated every haunted location like a puzzle that needed solving. Takun, on the other hand, was a local from Wakayama. He loved his hometown, sure, but he feared its legends, especially the one about an old tunnel hidden deep in the mountains. That tunnel wasn't just abandoned, it felt abandoned by the living. Like something inside it had never stopped grieving. It was built way back in the 1800s, just a normal passageway through the forest. Nothing special, at least until a young woman died in there in a sudden, violent accident. Her death was so messy, so brutal, that it changed how people talked about the tunnel. After that night, accidents skyrocketed. Cars would crash for no reason. Drivers always said the same thing. They saw a pale woman standing in front of their vehicle for a split second, just long enough to make them swerve, just long enough to die. Eventually, the government sealed it. Locals stopped going near it, and over time the tunnel sat there in silence, rotting slowly, as if it was mourning the woman who never left. A few years later is when Kuro and Takun went to see it. It was already late when they got there, and a storm had blown in over the mountains. The rain wasn't falling, it was attacking the car. Wind ripped through the trees, and the whole forest felt tight, unsettled. When they finally reached the tunnel, Takun froze. Something changed in his face immediately. I'll wait in the car, he whispered. I can't go in there. Kuro just nodded. He didn't push him. He grabbed his camera, switched on his torch, and walked into the tunnel alone. Meanwhile, Takun stayed inside the car, burnt. The rain hammered the windshield so loudly that he could barely hear himself breathe. The whole vehicle shook with every gust of wind, and then he heard it. A voice. Soft, female. Right beside his ear. He froze completely. His heart felt like it dropped out of his chest. The voice came again, clearer this time, and she said one word. Karu, go home. Not be careful. Not leave. It sounded like someone warning an intruder. Someone angry. Takun's body locked up. He felt sick. The voice felt too close, too real. Inside the tunnel, Kuro had problems of his own. The deeper he went, the stranger the air felt. It got colder, heavier, like he was walking into someone's personal space, like he was being watched from behind. Then he heard it. A footstep. Slow, heavy, deliberate. He spun around, torch shaking in his hand. Nothing, just the echo of his own breathing. But then another step came. Closer, closer. All his professionalism vanished. He ran. He sprinted through that long stretch of darkness, the sound of footsteps chasing him, echoing right behind him as if someone was running beside him. Hours later, when they were finally dry and safe, Kuro reviewed the footage, expecting to hear the footsteps. He scrubbed through the video slowly. Then he paused. Just for a split second, barely even a frame, something appeared behind him. A face. Pale. Distorted. Dead eyes staring straight into the camera. The face of the woman who died in that tunnel. Her expression frozen in the same moment of pain she died in, as if she was still reliving it. Kuro had been alone that night, at least he thought he was. She wasn't just watching him. She had followed him, and outside the tunnel, she had spoken directly into Takun's ear, a warning, a threat, a claim. Go home. To this day, that tunnel in Wakayama remains untouched. Not because of legends or rumors, but because everyone who hears Kuro and Takun's experience understands something important. Some places don't want visitors, some tragedies don't want to be disturbed, and some spirits don't want you there. I have been working as a postman for the last 10 years, traveling from village to village, riding a bicycle on narrow countryside roads, and delivering letters to people. That has been my daily routine. Most of these roads are deserted, especially after afternoon. But there was one place on my route where, just by passing through, a chill ran down my spine every single time. That place was the old Takahashi family mansion. In front of it stood a huge sacred camphor tree. Its leaves never seemed to stop moving, even when there was no wind. People used to say that a shadow lived in that tree. What kind of shadow? What it truly was? No one ever said clearly, but everyone said this much. Pass by during the day if you must, but after sunset, do not make the mistake of stopping there. Do not make the mistake of stopping there. At first, I did not believe any of it. I had grown up in the city. I did not believe in ghosts or spirits. I did not believe in such things at all. But whenever I passed by that mansion on my route, near that camphor tree, I felt something strange. The air grew heavy, the silence thickened, and it felt as if someone sitting on a high branch of the tree was staring directly at me. One day, during the afternoon, while delivering letters, I reached the mansion near the camphor tree. The sun was harsh, the heat was unbearable, but under the tree, there was a cold so intense that it felt as if the entire tree had been soaked in ice water. And there, for the first time, I saw him. A tall, thin, black figure was standing right next to the trunk of the camphor tree. His face was completely hidden in shadow. The nose and mouth were not visible. He had not even turned his neck. He was just standing there, silently, pressed against the tree trunk, as if he were a part of that tree itself. I thought he was just some passerby who had stopped to rest in the shade to escape the scorching sun, so I ignored him and moved on. The next day, the same man appeared in the same place, standing in the same way. On the third day, it was the same again. He stood exactly where he had before. He never moved, never walked. He just stood silently, completely still, as if waiting for someone. And for some reason, every time I passed near him, a strange wave of fear ran through my body, as if someone were touching my spine with an icy finger. But on the fourth day, he was gone. The place under the tree was empty. But that night, something happened that turned my life upside down. I returned home in the evening. After dinner, I parked my bicycle outside the door and went inside. At midnight, I felt thirsty and went to the kitchen. When I returned, I noticed that the door to my room was open. The air inside felt cold, even though it was a summer night. I closed the door again, but an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. In the morning, I saw camphor leaves scattered across my veranda. I froze. There was no camphor tree anywhere near my house. So how did these leaves get there? The next day, I received an empty envelope in my mailbox. No name, no address. Inside, there was only a blank white sheet of paper. I thought maybe some child was playing a prank. But that same night, around 2 o'clock, the lamp outside my house turned on by itself. There was a larger building nearby with a security camera installed. I went there and asked to check the footage facing my house. What I saw made my hands tremble. In the footage, a man was standing at the entrance of my house. It was the same figure I had seen under the camphor tree, the same height, the same shadow, the same unnatural stillness. In the very next frame, he vanished, completely gone. I called the police. They inspected my house. They said maybe it was a homeless person, maybe someone mentally unstable. But my heart knew it was not human. That night, I could not sleep. I covered the windows with curtains and locked all the doors tightly from the inside. But around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside my window. Slow, dragging footsteps. Then came the sound. Tack. Someone was knocking on my window. Gathering all my courage, I pulled the curtain aside and peered through the crack in the window. But there was nothing outside, only the wind blowing. And within the sound of that wind, it felt as if someone was breathing slowly. The next day, I went to the post office and submitted a request to change my delivery route. But it was rejected. They told me no one else was willing to take that route, and the letters still had to be delivered. So the next day, helplessly, I had to ride the same route again. When I reached the camphor tree mansion, there was no one standing there. I looked closely at the trunk of the tree. There were fresh scratch marks on the bark, as if someone had clawed it with their fingers. In rage, I pedaled my bicycle as fast as I could and left that place behind. That night, I lay down on my bed but could not sleep. I kept turning from side to side. Around 2:30, my eyes opened suddenly, and I saw a shadow slide past my window, long and twisted, as if it was not walking, but gliding. My heart began pounding violently. Then cold air seeped in from under the door, carrying with it a faint scent of camphor leaves. My body went numb with fear. I lay there, unmoving. I did not have the courage to get up. As soon as morning came, I went straight to the post office and applied for a transfer. Eventually, my transfer was approved. I also changed my residence. I moved to a different area altogether. But one thought never left my mind. How did he enter my house? That night, when I smelled camphor leaves in my room, I knew one thing clearly. That night, he was inside my room. Months passed. Slowly, everything began to feel normal again. I thought maybe he had finally stopped following me. But one day, when I reached the office, I found an envelope lying on my desk. I assumed a colleague had placed it there. I opened the envelope and my blood ran cold. Inside it was something that made my hair stand on end. Inside the envelope was a single camphor leaf. I asked everyone who might have put it there. No one knew anything. From that day onward, I completely stopped going out at night. I shut my windows tightly and locked my doors every evening. But one question still haunts me to this day. Who was that man? Why did he choose me? And what connection did I have with him? People say that if the shadow living in a sacred camphor tree notices someone, it follows that person. No matter how far they run, it never leaves them. I have changed my job. I have changed my house. I have changed my city. But even today, it feels as if that shadow still knows where I am. It is still somewhere close. Because this morning, when I once again found an envelope beneath my door and opened it, inside was the same thing, a camphor leaf.
Alright guys, thank you so much for listening. That's all the stories for today's video. I really hope you don't experience any nightmares tonight. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like the video, comment which story was your favorite, and also tell me where you're listening from. Once again, thank you so much for being here. This is Mahito, and remember, you can always call me Mahito Senpai. Until next time, good night, and bye.